Wonderful. Thanks, Coral, for all that you do here for Queer Sangha, and for today. Okay, I wanted to start with a little song. So I'm going to play this song. I posted the lyrics in the chat, and it's a repetitive song. It's by Ali Halpert, who's a queer person, and yeah, I really need the song today. I hope it's supportive for you too. Oh, yes. And please sing along, but keep yourself muted. Um, and see, and if you want to, if you feel called to do that. Great.
Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. You don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Holy breath and holy name. Will you ease this pain? Holy breath and holy name. Will you ease this pain? Loosen, loosen, baby. And you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let pain. Loosen, loosen, baby. And you don't have to carry the weight of the world in your muscles and bones. Let go, let go, let go. Loosen, loosen, baby. Holy breath and holy name. Will you ease this pain? Holy breath, will you ease this pain? Will you ease this pain?
And so just taking a minute to allow the resonance to land in the body. Okay. Thanks for singing along with me. Hi, I'm Arti. I use they, them pronouns. Normally I am in Vancouver, which are the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, unceded territories. Today I'm in Toronto. I live part-time in Toronto, and these are the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, Seneca peoples, and many other Indigenous peoples who've lived here across time. And I am fresh from somatic experiencing training. So for those of you who know about SE, it's a trauma modality. And I am kind of in a forever process of becoming a therapist. It's been like a 20-year process. I think I'm finally ready. And mostly I weave trauma work into mindfulness practice. Um, yeah, okay. So I wanted to start with meditation. And I wanted to just take some time to really be with anchors. So in our meditation practice, we have an anchor that we come back to. I really like the way that Michelle McDonald, who's an insight teacher, talks about this. She talks about how um, anchors are really a refuge. And the practice is so much about our mind wandering out to sea, you know? And then when we can call ourselves back to the safe harbor that is our anchor, we can practice with safety and then go all out to sea where it's a bit scary and all kinds of things are happening. And then we come back to where it's safe. And this is really such a fundamental principle of trauma-informed practice is finding refuges of safety. So let's find a harbor today that feels most supportive. So we're going to experiment with a few types of harbors. Um, okay. So normally, the breath is often an anchor that is kind of assumed usually. We'll just focus on the breath, be with the breath, and then as the mind wanders, come back to the breath. Many of you have done this before. But there's many other anchors that we can use, and a huge part of trauma-informed practice is having choice. When trauma happens, it really is there's this real sense of there being a loss of choice. And so having choice about your anchor is a really beautiful antidote to that. So, okay, getting into your meditation posture, that could be sitting, standing, lying down. Again, choice. You can have your eyes closed or your eyes turned downward. And just to say that I started today with singing because that's currently my favorite anchor. So it can be creative, you know, it doesn't have to look like one specific thing, as in I anchor my entire practice in chanting and then I practice. And the resonance of that is actually the anchor for my practice. So we can get creative. Okay. So turning your attention inwards. And we'll start with the anchor of the earth. Feeling into the weightiness of gravity. Perhaps your jaw is dropping a little bit. Maybe your shoulders roll back and down. Feeling the heaviness in your arms if that's there. And then landing in the gravity at your sits bones. Noticing that you're being supported by the earth. Maybe at your sits bones, maybe your thighs. Perhaps your feet are being supported by the earth. If you're lying down, then maybe it's your whole back body. And see if you can surrender just a little bit more to the support of the earth. And when your mind is out to sea, as the mind naturally does, you can bring your attention back to the sits bones, back to the places where you are directly touching the earth. And moving on to the next anchor, the breath. And just noticing where it's easiest to notice the breath. And really trusting what your body is saying here. If it's feeling panicky, if it's not feeling like a safe harbor, you can let go and go back to the earth or pick another resting place for you. This is about rest, about ease. So you may be noticing the breath in the chest, the rise and fall of the belly, the nose, or perhaps the back body. Noticing Noticing that the breath is going in when the breath is going in, and noticing that the breath is going out when it's going out. For some people, it can help to have a mental note of in and out. Other folks like to count the breath. So an inhale and exhale cycle is 1, next one is 2. And again, the mind will wander. That is what the mind does. We can gently bring our attention back from the sea, back to the safety of the harbor of our breath. And we'll move on to the possible anchor of hearing. And so noticing any sounds that are in the room with you. There might be a hum of lights or appliances, maybe some chattering in the background, just noticing. And trying not to fixate on the object of that's creating the sound, but just noticing, hearing. And it can help again to have that mental note of hearing. And there might be external sounds, but there might also be internal sounds, like the gurgling of a belly or whooshing sounds of blood. And lastly, we'll be with full body awareness as a possible anchor. And so we can get a sense of our body as just resting, the whole body resting here. Kind of zooming out to see as much of the body as we can. And anchoring in the sensations of the body. So noticing maybe temperature. Maybe some parts of your body are cold and some parts are warm. Noticing energy shifting and moving. Noticing the tingling in the hands and feet if that's there for you. It's really this sense of resting in aliveness and the aliveness that's here. And then taking a minute now to just sort of check in. Which anchor felt most easeful today? Thank you, friends. I don't have my meditation bell because I'm traveling, but ding. Okay. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about trauma-informed dharma and not just trauma-informed mindfulness, which feels like some kind of like trauma-informed trademark sort of weird thing. But the idea that the whole like mindfulness is one piece of the dharma, but the whole dharma we can understand through a kind of through a trauma-informed lens. Melina is here. Um, and I kind of created this talk on the fly. So I was like, can you just poke your head in if I'm doing something weird or I'm not quite, it's not, I didn't quite get it right. Because we're planning to do a longer version of this talk together. So yeah. So we're just gonna workshop it. Okay. Okay. So there is a term in Pali, the language of the Buddha, called Upaya, which translates to skillful means. Um, so the technical definition is a concept emphasizing that practitioners may use their own specific methods or techniques that fit the situation in order to gain enlightenment. Okay, so basically it's kind of like the Buddha was like, when we're looking at the noble truths, it's like there's suffering. Suffering is caused by craving. There's an end to suffering, and here is an eightfold path around how we can get free from suffering. And also, we all have our own causes and conditions for suffering, right? Greed, hatred, and delusion shows up in really different ways for all of us based on our childhoods, based on past lifetimes, so many different causes and conditions, including like structures of oppression. And so, yes, absolutely the Eightfold Path. And also that's going to look really different for all of us. And so there's this way that we can be a bit creative about it. So one of the main teachings of Upaya comes from a story in the Mahayana tradition from the Lotus Sutra. And the Buddha was speaking to his loyal disciple, Sariputra, and he was telling him a story. And the story goes like this. So there were a bunch of kids playing in a house, and then the dad was hanging outside of the house, and the dad saw that the house was in flames. And so the dad, obviously terrified for his children, starts, yelling, "Get out of the house! The house is on fire!" And the kids who are, absorbed in the joy of a game are all, absorbed in that. And they're like, yeah, yeah, whatever, dad, they just keep playing their game. So kind of caught up in greed, right? And this kind of clinging towards the joy of playing a game. And so he, yells again and again, they ignore him. And then he's like, aha, I will trick them, right? So he's like, I've got these really cool games out here. You should come out and play them. And he knows his kids. So he's like, I have this game for you and this game for you, really trying to get them to come out of the house. And then they come out of the house and they're like, oh, dad was not lying. The house is up in flames, you know? And so when the Buddha is telling Shariputra the story, he's like, so do you think that this father was guilty of falsehood? Is this false speech? And he says, no, world honored one. The rich man simply made it possible for his sons to escape the peril of fire and preserve their lives. He did not commit a falsehood. Why do I say this? Because if they were able to preserve their lives, then they had already obtained a plaything of sorts. And how much more so when, through an expedient means, they are rescued from that burning house, right? And so the Buddha kind of talks about this as a metaphor, where he's saying a simile, lots of similes in Buddhism, and he's saying, just like this father was the father to these children, I am kind of the compassionate father of the world, father to all of the world. And just as these sons were in this house, so too are all humans who are born into, who are born into this burning house of greed, hatred, and delusion, you know? So it's kind of like we can take it really personally that we're not noticing the burning house around us, right? We're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Why didn't I see that the house was burning? I should have gotten out sooner. And the Buddha's kind of saying here, yeah, that's kind of the first noble truth. Okay. So sometimes we need to use this like method of, I want to say trickery, but it doesn't feel like that's quite right. Just skillful means, ways of doing things that are a little bit outside of the box to get us to really, really notice suffering and freedom from suffering. So one of my favorite stories about this is the Buddha himself using skillful means. So on the night of his enlightenment, he's sitting under the Bodhi tree and, and he's getting free, right? And as that's happening, Mara shows up and Mara's throwing all kinds of things at him, to try to kind of shake him from his seat of enlightenment. And he's kind of being there with all the hindrances, and the hindrances are disappearing one by one by one. And the last hindrance to disappear for all of us is doubt. And so Mara kind of throws at him, who are you? Who are you to be, to think that you could possibly be enlightened? Who do you think you are? And the Buddha is like, oh, struck by that arrow. And instead of just trying to muscle through, he reaches for the earth and he asks the earth to witness him. This is skillful means, right? Okay. In trauma-informed practice, and in the West, we would call that resourcing. Buddha was touching the earth and asking for a resource. And we can do that too in our practice. Okay. So now I'm going to tell you, if you've sat with me before, you know that the way that I offer Dharma is by telling you all the ways that I've done it wrong. It's kind of my jam. So I'm going to tell you a way that I did it wrong. And it might trigger warning for big trauma responses, I guess. So take care of yourself as you listen to this. I'm telling you a story about my very first long retreat that I did 15-ish years ago, 14 years ago, I think. Um, and at that time, my practice was really about there's something fundamentally wrong with me that needs to be fixed. And so I'm going to practice so that I can be more equanimous and more better. It's like a self-improvement project, right? That's really what my practice was about. That's not the right way to practice, but that's what I was doing, you know? And so a part of that is like, I'm this working class kid. I'm going on this super expensive retreat. I want to get the most bang for my money, you know? And was like, I'm here to do 10 years of psychotherapy. I'm going right in, you know? And so just like the Buddha, when he was practicing for enlightenment, all of the hindrances were there, you know, kind of bugging him. He probably wasn't bugged by it, I don't know, but I was really bugged by the hindrances as they were showing up. So aversion, craving, restlessness and worry, sloth and torpor, which is like sleepiness, and hatred. Did I cover it? No. And doubt, of course, the last one. Thanks, Melina. Doubt. And the one that was really, really plaguing me was sleepiness. And so I'm a couple weeks into my retreat. And at this point, I've set markers for myself for where I should be, right? And I'm not getting past this hindrance of sleepiness. And in past retreats, I've had this experience where all the hindrances go away. And it's just this gorgeous biti, this like just deep joy where it's so easy to track everything that's happening. And I don't even need a harbor. The sea is my whole harbor. And it's just so joyful. And I was like, that's the way to enlightenment. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get there. And in order to get there, I need to defeat sleepiness. So here I was practicing and just doing this like thing that you do when you're meditating and you're nodding off, you know? And I'd go in to see the teachers and I'd show up with all this aggression towards myself. Like, why can't I defeat sleepiness? And they would give me the normal answers of, you know, you try to stand a little bit, like gentle ways to be with sleepiness. Maybe go for a walk, maybe do walking meditation. And I was like, no, that's not the way. You know, the way is sitting, like all of these bizarre hierarchies. That I had in my practice then, you know. And so I wasn't interested in skillful means. I was really interested in doing it the right way and not understanding that the right way is really different in every moment for everybody, you know. So here I am doing this sleepiness thing, and I decide that I'm going to put in a bunch of energy to figure out what's underneath the sleepiness. So I can feel it. I can feel the sleepiness. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to put all my energy to seeing what's right here. And what I felt was terror. What I felt was profound, profound fear. And so I'm like, oh, well, the practice is to be with everything as it is. So great, I'm going to be with terror. And I'm going to look so sharply at terror to really know terror, you know? And then I start doing that. And so there's this energy of this flight energy that's really, really big, but also fight energy. That's, you know, this kind of rising energy. And then there's all of this sleepiness making it go away because it's too much to deal with. And so as I was trying to get rid of sleepiness, that lifted. And then all of this terror shot through. And when that happened, when I got up from that sit, I was walking into walls. I didn't sleep for 3 weeks. I was a hot, traumatized mess, and I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know a thing about trauma then, or very little. I didn't know what was happening, and I did have to go home early because I just couldn't find any safety, and it was really bad. Um, and not to tie like a nice bow on a difficult story, but here's a little bit of a bow, which is that, you know, my teachers were like, you need to maybe try somatic experiencing. This is a thing that's worked for a lot of meditators. And I went and did, and I had a very intense chronic illness. I still do. I have fibromyalgia. But at that time, I was extremely disabled by it. And 3 years into weekly SE sessions, most of my suffering around my chronic illness went away. And then I decided to do the training, and here I am, a meditation teacher, like it's all connected. And so even the things that feel like the most intense suffering, we never know what's next. We never know what's going to happen in the next moment, you know? Okay. So don't do that. Maybe don't do that. So what we actually want to be doing is this idea of trauma-informed practice, skillful means. Um, okay, so what is trauma? A really quick and dirty definition from Resnakam is trauma is an overwhelm to the system. So it's too much, too fast, too soon. So we just can't really digest what's happening in the moment. And yes, our meditation practice is about being with everything that is here as it's here. But if we can't be with what's here because it's too much, too fast, too soon, we're overwhelmed by it and we can't actually witness it, we're just totally in it. That's not being skillful, right? Even the Buddha had said at some point, I don't remember when, maybe you know, about if this is not working. I can't remember what he was talking about. I'm going to have to look it up, but you can drop the practice, like drop the practice and come back to it or practice in a different way. Okay. That's why there's so many options, right? There's so many options around how to meditate. Okay. So some basic trauma principles. Um, uh, right. When I think about this, doing our practice, being with what's here as it's here, is profoundly brave. It's profoundly brave. It's asking us to be with groundlessness. And our entire world is about not feeling groundlessness, right? Capitalism, it's like, you're feeling bad, go buy some stuff. Everything is kind of set up to not feel. Yeah, I just want to honor how brave it is to be present. Okay, so some trauma principles. We'll start with titration. This is the idea that less is more. So this comes from chemistry term. So you can imagine two beakers filled with fluids. And when you pour the fluids together, they could cause an explosion. So what chemists learn to do is to take a dropper and stick it in one of the fluids and slowly, slowly, slowly drop it into the other beaker. And that way there's no explosion. And so that's what we're trying to do with trauma. Yes, we want to be here. We want to be with everything that's here. But if it overwhelms us, we're not really going to be with it, right? So being with something in a drop by drop sort of way sounds good in practice, or it sounds good in theory, much more difficult in practice because our bodies really lean towards a negativity bias. So our bodies were built in a world where there were tigers and lions and all kinds of beings chasing us. And so we're kind of always looking for the tiger outside, but also inside, right? When the Buddha talks about in the metta phrases, may you be free from danger both internally and externally. That's what gets called to mind when I think about the negativity bias. And so our bodies are brilliant. We're always trying to heal. And so we'll find what doesn't feel good and we'll fixate. In somatic experiencing language, we call that, I think somewhat dramatically, but it's a helpful image, the trauma vortex. So we'll just be like, oh, that feels bad. I'm going to really focus in on it. And it's not because we're unskillful, it's because we're trying to heal. And so it takes some effort to pull back and be in and to work with this principle of titration. So one of the ways we can do that is if we have overwhelming feelings in our body, to open our eyes, open our eyes so you feel a little bit less when you're noticing the external world. Also, so much of working with trauma is triggers, and triggers are about something that's happened in the past that's showing up in the present. And so when we open our eyes, we're kind of noting to the body, oh, look, I'm here and now. So whatever's happening in the past is in the past. And my vision is telling me that I'm here. So that can be really helpful. Another way, like a favorite titration technique of mine is, or that I was taught, was noticing the outline of something. So when I had a lot of intense chronic pain, it wouldn't make sense to go right into the center of the chronic pain, even though that's where my attention wanted to go, was to find the most painful pain. And instead, I would go, okay, can I draw an outline of that pain? And where is it in the body? And can I just stay with the outline of it? And I might also want to open my eyes. That's still being with it, but it's being with it in a way where I can actually be with it instead of being overwhelmed by it. You can also do things like, where in the body is there less pain? Another really great titration technique that I was taught is called reverse binoculars. So binoculars, you put them up against your eyes and they take something that's far away and it brings it closer to you. Reverse binoculars do the opposite. So it's something that feels really, really, really close in. Like maybe it's an image that shows up that feels quite difficult to be with. Maybe you're really angry at someone and here they are and they feel like they're right up here. You can throw them on the moon. You can be like, okay, what does it feel like if they're on the moon? What does it feel like actually if they're on Venus? Like you can throw them as far in a different solar system, however far you need them to be. And then as you're working with it, because the amazing thing when your witness is online, when you can actually be with what's here instead of being overwhelmed by it, you can actually play with it. You can be like, okay, I'm going to put you on the moon, see how that feels. I'm going to put you on Venus, see how that feels. I'm going to put you in Tunisia, see how that feels. And then maybe I want to stop once they're in Ontario. Maybe Ontario, like I'm in southern Ontario, they're in northern Ontario. That's great. That's as close as I want them to be. So that's a titration method. Another one is pendulation. So this is where you kind of move back and forth between a resource. We'll talk about that in a minute. So something that feels good. And then what's really difficult. So you might go into, okay, I'm being with the outline of this intense pain that I'm feeling, I don't know, in my shoulder. And now I'm going to open my eyes and look at this beautiful houseplant and notice how I know in my body that that houseplant feels really good to look at. Oh, there's like an opening sensation in my chest. Beautiful, beautiful. So you're going to be with the pain in the shoulder for a second and then come back to the opening in the chest while looking at the plant and then back and forth and back and forth. So basically, what I'm offering you by telling you all of these strategies is just some ways that you can, when you notice that you're really overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, to kind of practice ways of upaya, really, of skillful means of being like, how can I still be here even when things are overwhelming? And this does take practice, and oftentimes takes another nervous system, a therapist, to kind of help guide you through the process. Okay. One that we all know, we might not know the name of it, but we all do all the time is co-regulation. So when you're having a bad day, you might call a friend and be like, I'm having a really shitty day. And then they're like, listen to you and you feel better. They're offering you some of their kind of grounded nervous system energy that you can borrow. And even if we're on silent retreat, we can still co-regulate with images. I start my practice every morning imagining Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, at my back, holding my shoulder. And she's my main co-regulator. I mean, she's holding the suffering of literally all beings with compassion. So she can handle whatever my bullshit is for the day. And I can imagine her caring for me. And I really struggle with insomnia. And so one of my favorite imaginal co-regulation techniques is imagining a bunch of people that I love who are all holding hands around my bed and just wishing some ease for me. So yeah. Another practice that I find really important is trusting the body's natural impulses. So peeing when you gotta pee, if you're meditating and you gotta pee, sure. I mean, it can be like interesting to kind of just notice pressure and wait for a little bit. But at some point you gotta pee, even if you're at the beginning of an hour-long sit, as long as it's okay in that container to get up. Um, it's important to get up to pee. It's important to cough and sneeze and fart and do all the things that our bodies want us to do. So often we're like, I will go get a drink when I'm done this paper that I'm writing, but actually, can you stop and trust that the body is telling you what the body needs? Trauma is so often about this sense of our boundaries being overridden, and so it takes time for the body to trust us, and we can help with that process by following the body's impulses. And this is also true if you're neurodivergent. If you're neurodivergent and you need to stim or sway or move your body. So for like a decade, my practice was about staying as still as I possibly could. But actually, you can be mindful when you're moving. We have walking meditation. If you've got to get up to pee, you can start noticing pressure in the bladder. Okay, now I'm moving my leg. Now I'm standing up. What does standing feel like? Now I'm walking. You can be mindful in every moment and you can still really respect what your body needs, including stimming really, like making a lot of really big feelings. You can just notice that. Obviously you need to be mindful of other people in the room, but you can do what your body needs you to do. And then lastly, resourcing. So this is about being with what feels good. What feels good. And I want to be clear that this is not about feeling good for feeling good's sake. This is not about comfort. We don't get free through comfort, right? None of us came to this practice because we're like, how can I be more comfortable? We're like, let's be with what's difficult. And the reason for that is, no mud, no lotus, right? If we're not with what's difficult, it's pretty hard to get free. It's a lot easier to be with what feels good. That's not always true for everyone. For some people, it's actually really hard to be with what feels good. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is the reason why we resource is so that we can build up enough capacity so that we can be with what's difficult. Does that make sense? So it's like about, yeah, it's not comfort. It's about increasing our capacity. Okay. So let's do a little practice. We're going to do 3 little short practices that are resourcing. And they might not be resourcing for you in this moment. It's important to kind of to just try them out at different times. So we'll start with the self hug. So you're going to take your left hand and put it under your armpit here, and the right hand goes here on your deltoid. And then you can just feel into this sense of being contained, that you've really got you. See if you're noticing anything in the body that's letting you know, oh, I'm responding to this. And letting go of that. And then just checking in to see what feels different right now. And we'll try another practice. So we'll do a hand here at the lizard brain, right at the back of the base of your skull, and then a hand here on your forehead. And you can kind of imagine that they're in dialogue with each other, the 2 hands. And if your arms get tired, you can take a break and go back. And letting that go. And then noticing if anything feels different. And we'll try one more, which is hand on the belly, the lower belly, and then hand on heart. Noticing the temperature of the hands and the weight of the hands. And the hands are just here to support whatever's already happening. It's not here to take anything away. It's just kind of like, I got you. And then letting that go. And again, checking in to see what's different right now. Ding. Thank you for your practice, dear ones. Okay. We can use a lot of our senses to resource. So we use touch, and I talked a little bit about, looking at the houseplant that feels good, or maybe it's a really sweet textile, or just something that feels nice to look at. A resource that I was reminded of is scents. So I struggle with migraines a lot these days, and um, a friend offered me some peppermint oil. And instead of putting it on my skin, I just smelt it. So that was me titrating, resourcing, right? Taking a tiny drop and seeing, is that enough before I put it on my skin? So even with things that feel really good, we all know what it's like to be like, I want to go to this party. It's going to be awesome. I'm so excited to be around people. And then we get there and we're like, I gotta go. It's like too much of a good thing. So we can titrate into what feels good using our beautiful mindfulness skills to just notice, does this feel right? Does it not feel right? And trusting what arises. Okay. We've got a few minutes left. Not enough time to do another practice. Curious if folks have questions.